the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. Thanks again for coming back. My name is Clint Armitage. This is the Liberty Podcast, and we are now into a second part of a series called God Did the Impossible. Now we're going to get a little bit more intimate and more personal for the disciples and getting this whole miracle thing for them, increasing their faith. And we're going to see how Jesus puts them in situations where they have to increase their faith. They're forced to, because otherwise they are stuck. So that's what happened with the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus told them they had to do something. So they brought what they had, what little they had, and Jesus performed a miracle and solved the problem in abundance and given more than they needed in that situation there. And now with this circumstance, which is really, it's right after. So with the feeding the 5,000 was in Matthew. We looked at Matthew, verse 13, stopped at verse 21. And now we're looking at Matthew 14, starting in verse 22, going to verse 33. And it's about Jesus walking on the water. And we'll talk about it. We'll break down the verse here. But Jesus dismisses the crowds, sends the disciples away, and it's just the disciples and Jesus later on. And you're going to see another miracle happen, but it's going to be a more intimate, personal type miracle for just the disciples. And then even just for Peter. But then we're going to see some faith increase, and we're going to see the light bulb goes on for the disciples, and they're going to start to understand who Jesus really is. And that their faith increases and their wisdom increases about God, about Jesus himself. Then now we're going to look at an even more personal miracle for each disciple, especially Peter. So let's take a look here. Matthew 14, verse 22 through 33. It reads, "Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. 'It's a ghost,' they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid.' 'Lord, if it is you,' Peter replied, 'tell me to come to you on the water.' 'Come,' he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. And he cried out, 'Lord, save me.' Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. 'You of little faith,' he said, 'why did you doubt?' And when they climbed into the boat and the wind died down, then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, 'Truly, you are the Son of God.'" So that's kind of how it's, again, another miracle that's more intimate, but that's how God can use circumstances that seem to be impossible or seem to be scary. You feel it's just you. It's very intimate, very personal, and no one else can help you. And then Jesus comes in a way that you don't even think is possible. That's how he comes to save you from the storm and then also increase your faith in him. And then what also happened here is Peter had faith. He was the only one out of the 12. So let's see how God can use one man's faith and personally and intimately affect the lives around him. So out of the 12, again, only one asked to do the impossible. And Jesus gave him permission to do it. Peter asked, and then Jesus gave him permission, said, "Come to me, walk on water." And so we can learn two things from this moment, this incredible moment. First, we have to ask God to be able to participate in the impossible. If we want to be a part of miracles, if we want to be a part of God's plan, and his plan includes miracles, his plan includes the impossible, because that's what faith is, right? It's believing and not seeing. So we're going to have to ask God to participate in the impossible, because he's doing the impossible all over the world every day. He's doing miracles somewhere in the world. And when a miracle can happen around us, why aren't we asking God if we can participate in it? Because that is what we should be doing. We should be participating in as many miracles, in as many impossibilities as we can. Because if we don't ask to be involved in God's miracles, then we're going to miss out on all these opportunities. That's going to be, that's going to be there for us. We can take part in it, but we don't ask, so we miss out on that opportunity. Again, in this case, there were 12 people that had the opportunity to participate in the impossible, but only one asked to take part in it. Only one. The second point here is that we have to step out in faith. After God grants us permission, right? We ask him to participate in this impossibility, and then he grants us permission. He says, "Come to me." Then Peter, he didn't blindly step out of the boat expecting to walk on water. He He stepped out of the boat after Jesus gave him permission to step out. And that's the point here. Peter waited for Jesus to instruct him. He didn't just do it, jumping out of the boat, hoping God would sustain him, right? Sometimes that's where, Christians can sometimes screw things up. I've done it before, and we suffer unnecessarily because we jump out of the boat expecting God to act without him telling us first, or we move before God and before God tells us to move. And then we wonder why he didn't come with us. And we wonder why things didn't work out the way we thought they were going to work out. And we do this because one reason is lack of patience. We don't want to wait on God sometimes. God may say no. He may say wait. He may say maybe. We don't know. But we have to wait for God if we want to participate in his miracles, in his impossibilities in this life. We're going to have to wait for him. We can't just do it because we're not the ones in charge here. And we have to understand that miracles are according to God's time, not our time. So wait on God's instructions before jumping out of the boat and expecting some type of miracle. That's going to save all of us a lot of frustration and a lot of bitterness toward God sometimes, because when it doesn't work out, we think, well, why God? Why didn't you do this for me? And that's because he said no, or he said wait, or he was setting something up and we didn't ask permission and we just went ahead and did it before we were supposed to. Okay. And then we get frustrated. And again, more bitterness. So this is kind of the same pattern that we also see in Joshua chapter 3. The Israelites needed to step out in faith by stepping into the Jordan before the impossible would happen, right? That God was going to stop up the Jordan. But before the water was going to be stopped, and make way for all these Israelites, 2 million Israelites, to cross over the Jordan onto dry ground. But what would happen, they had to do is step out in faith, right? Okay, we know that. The priest had to step in the water first, and then once they did that, then the miracle happened. So we know that that's what had to happen first. They had to step out in faith. However, Joshua just didn't do it, believing God would, part the waters for them. God told them what to do first. He told them if they wanted to participate in this impossibility, crossing this Jordan River during flood season, when they acted, they had to wait till God granted them permission to participate in the miracle, and then they could act, okay? We need to keep our eyes off the storm, is because at first we want to participate in this miracle. Well, the miracle is not going to be just super, super clean, right? There's going to be some issues sometimes. Just like in this case here, Peter says, hey, Lord, can I come to you? If it's you, can I come to you? And he says, yeah, come on. He steps out on the water, but what does he do? He looks at the storm. He gets distracted by the storm. He gets scared, it says, right? He's fearful. But we need to keep our eyes off of the storm because it's going to be going on around us, especially when a miracle happens. Miracles happen when it looks like it's an impossibility. So the storm's going on around us. We can't focus on the storm. We have to focus on Jesus. We know that. That's what happened with Peter. That's why he was sinking. We can't be distracted from doing the impossible. So think about how much longer, how many more steps would Peter been able to take if he didn't get distracted by the storm, if he didn't let fear creep in? If he just focused on Jesus, how many more impossibilities could we take part in? Peter especially, he could have walked all the way to Jesus and been doing an impossible miracle continually, but he got caught up in the storm, right? All right, so we have to do the same thing. We got to avoid that kind of stuff in our life. We have to keep our gaze on the miracle worker. Because how many miracles would we be able to experience in life? Think about that. If we could stay focused, we could experience a ton of miracles. But that's where we have to really, really stay focused on God. God can use our lives to affect others around you, even if we failed. And it shows this here with Peter, okay? Because Peter showed great faith for the first minute and then a lack of faith the next minute. And that's when he started to sink. But did God abandon him, or did he say, no faith, I can't help you? No, God didn't do that. God didn't say, well, your faith faltered, so too bad. No, what he did was he reached down during Peter's lack of faith moment. He addressed Peter with the truth of the whole situation, and he pulled him out of the circumstance and saved him from drowning, right? He said, you have little faith, but he still helped him out. Now, Jesus knows that we fail and our faith will falter when, we're trying to attempt to walk towards him. We're trying. He knows we're going to get caught up in the storms around us sometimes, and we lose focus on him. So that's one thing we can have comfort in, is that a loving God allows for mistakes. He comes down to our level and he brings us up so we can do the impossible with him. So that's part 2 of God Did the Impossible. Thanks for joining me. This is the Liberty Podcast, and until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.